This is Marco Reus, and you're listening to the Yellowwallpod podcast.
Episode 289 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host, Stefan Butzko, and this week we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's bitter defeat against Union Berlin and how Marco Reus will attempt to recruit Kai Havertz. And for this joins me, the only one that was available, because everyone is dodging us, Matthias Zug. Hello, Matthias. I'm glad that you're here in this emotional support group post the first L of the season.
Well, Stefan, I'm glad to be here, but only because of the company. It's surprising. Dortmund have an embarrassing loss, and all of a sudden nobody has time. Always glad to be here.
It's Wednesday now. This episode was previously scheduled for first Monday, then Tuesday, because nobody ever really had time. So now I guess there's a bit of more emotional distance. I don't know how it would have been had we recorded like half hour after the game. Probably would have sounded a bit different. And first of all, we don't have any Patreon sponsors, obviously, for this episode, because who the hell would sponsor this particular episode? I sure as heck would not. But before we begin, I just want to thank anyone for tuning in. Because I know that's a masochistic thing to do. So if you're with us after this sort of loss, thanks for tuning in. Matthias, I'm not sure where to begin. I guess we can start with the first half hour against Union, because that was, I think, a start that, in my opinion, was a bit more bright than against Cologne, because Dortmund were not as abject. And I think in that first 25 minutes, Union Berlin had like one completed pass a minute. So it looked, at least I thought it started promising. What were your first impressions of the game? Because as you just told me, you could not watch it live because your son had his birthday party, so you already knew the result watching it. So what were your observations then?
Well, obviously, after the third round of vodka before watching it, no, but I mean, I agree with you. The first 30 minutes, I mean, you see the first Union goal go in and you're like, oh, great. A set piece goal. Shocker. Even though it's a little bit different than the usual. It wasn't, throw it and kick it into the mixer and see what happens. Cause obviously Hummels is kind of a beast there. You play it out more towards the edge of the area. It was actually a set piece routine where I went, okay, that can happen. It took Dortmund obviously by surprise, much like the Köln corner routine was very well crafted. So hats off to a well crafted corner routine. So there are new ways for Dortmund to concede now from corners. But then when Paco got the equalizer, like I said, it was within the first 30 minutes. I was like, okay, that was Union's goal. And now it's time to kick it up a notch and just steamroll them. And, it didn't quite go off. Multiple reasons for that. And it's almost like Union Berlin watched the Köln game and was Fischer went, what can we do that correctly what Köln did wrong? It's almost like Dortmund didn't even bother watching the Köln game and just went, look how great we were against a crappy Augsburg side. And it just devolved, really. It didn't evolve. There's no evolution there, for the rest of the match. So I'm glad I wasn't able to watch it live and already knew the result. Otherwise, it would not have been a happy household that evening.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I think there was a lot of unhappiness after the game, in particular because not because it was just a blip and, you know, a slip up that could happen at this point of the season still against the euphoric promoted team, but because this is exactly the loss that we have seen a million times already from this team. And it's more about the long-term development, or rather lack thereof, and that's just extremely frustrating. I mean, we've seen atrocious set-piece defending, we've seen individual errors, and in the end, you know, Dortmund also lost their collective heads again and were a bunch of headless chickens with zero clue how to break down a defensive opponent. And it's just yet another mix that is very discouraging for the season that's ahead and for the ambition they have. This should have been an easy win in terms of the opponent. Maybe not completely walk over them 6-0, 7-0, nothing like that. But at least, you know, Dortmund usually should not have to play their very best football to come away with a win against a side like Union Berlin. But the football they played was, nowhere near good enough. If there's one modicum of positivity we can take away from is that the way Julian Brandt played, and he in the first 5 minutes he had a very good chance when he was still on the right wing where he started. I think he started on the right wing and then Jadon Sancho on the left and switched later. But in the first 5 minutes he had this very good chance after Mats Hummels' diagonal pass, and then a couple more moments, one or two, where he could have played the ball then I think straight to Alcácer or Reus. I don't remember who it was, but nice solo. But the problem with Julian Brandt, for example, is for this game, and which is my positive takeaway because it's going to get better just in the zone he was playing, he just didn't receive the ball all that often because he was playing most of the time, yes, on the left wing if you want, but a bit more centrally, and it wasn't easy for Dortmund to get into that channel, and I hope and believe that they will figure out over time how to get the ball right into that space where Julian Brandt then can turn around and wreak havoc the way he does. And that's the one positive. And now the negative part is just this 4-2-3-1 old system. I don't think Lucien Favre needs to play with the double pivot there. I like the headline from Kicker, Die Mutprobe, before the game, which is the dare, whether he would have the courage to drop the double pivot, because in such a game it is, in my opinion, just not necessary to play like that, especially the way Dortmund did it in the first half with Delaney and Weigl, and then Weigl dropping in between the center backs, which leaves Delaney further up front, and then he is supposed to distribute the ball, which is just not a very smart idea to begin with. And it's also just the blueprint. Urs Fischer, just as you just said, Matthias, had to look at what Cologne did, take Anthony Uja and Sebastian Andersen and put them up top to basically disturb Dortmund's center backs, then isolate the fullbacks, and either Dortmund's central midfielders are already in the cover shadow. If not, you put a number 6 or number 8 up to them to disrupt them. So quite simple. And I think for Dortmund, the first half hour was positive because Union Berlin wasn't quite as courageous as Cologne were from the get-go. But then Union found better and better into the game, and Dortmund, did not. That was just deteriorating. And that to me is maybe the main problem. A team like Dortmund should just put scare the living bejesus out of Union Berlin. That's what I think they should do. Just be a top team and make that very, very clear that you pass the ball around in a way that Union do not get any ideas or learn their courage after 30 minutes or so, but they need to pee their pants for 90 minutes, so to speak. A little bit like Augsburg did, just suffocate them eventually with possession and with the skill and don't let up. And that's something that really irks me, because Dortmund certainly have the potential to do that, but they're too timid, too slow, and then of course concede the first goal, come back, but never really in that fashion where you think, wow, they're going to blow Union Berlin away here, or they're clearly the better team. If you swap the jerseys, you wouldn't even realize it. So that was simply bad. And I think if I think about the 90 minutes, the most vexing thing still, though, is the fact that they could not substitute Thomas Delaney out of the game after he crashed with his head to the ground. I've been sitting here for ages and ages now, talking about how dangerous concussions are and how the freaking Bundesliga needs to get its shit together. But yet again, here we are, player really hard impact on the ground, is bleeding on his temple, so that the impact was at a very critical point. And then, he gets stitched up. 2 minutes later, he's back on the pitch. And I think in the period until the halftime, until he was finally subbed out, he played 2 more headers. And I think it's just too dangerous and a complete no-go. And there needs to be profound change. And before I rant even further, Matthias, what is your take on the Delaney situation?
I had a discussion not too long ago about the head injuries in the NFL, and people are like, "Oh, I don't watch the NFL anymore because of concussions," and so I watch Bundesliga or Premier League or whatever. And I said, yeah, obviously there are concussions in American football. It's obviously you're slamming face to face, but they learn through their mistakes and their ill-gotten policies, and actually now have a strong concussion protocol in general in American sports, but specifically in the NFL. Whereas in soccer and football, be it Bundesliga, Premier League, Champions League, I just have to think of Jan Vertonghen, or World Cup Finals, Christoph Kramer. There's nothing. It is like they have no idea what is this concussion thing you speak about? Is that a myth? Is that like the tooth fairy? And that really irks me. These are medical professionals. Obviously they know what a concussion is. If they, no pun intended, have 2 brain cells to rub together, they would look at the protocols that have been put in place in U.S. sports, again, specifically the NFL, and go, hey, we need to do something like that in our sport. Because at that point, you still had your subs. Take them off. Don't take that risk. I mean, you think about it, people complain in the NFL it happens. In the NFL, if you have a great season, you're playing like 19 games. If you're a professional footballer like Delaney is, who also represents his country, is going to play Champions League, et cetera, there's a good chance you're going to play like 50 games. So take the player off. Don't risk it, especially ahead of an international break. You're like, okay, you can take a longer break. I don't know if he got called up by Denmark. If he did, that compounds the situation, and the Danish FA is even dumber than the people who told Jan Vertonghen to go back on, because anybody could see that guy was out of it. It's a concern. It's an issue that needs to be taken care of. Of course, head injuries to this degree don't happen that often in this sport, but they do happen. And the few times that they do happen, just make the necessary change. It should be no issue, no problem at all for FIFA to come in and change the rule and say, if you've already used all your 3 subs and then a player goes down with a head injury, that you're worried has a concussion, you're allowed to play a 4th sub, kind of like we do in the DFB Pokal in extra time. Just do it that. It's simple. Nobody should be annoyed by it. Just do that. Seeing what he went through bothers me. I've gotten concussions, probably explains a few things, at a time when there was no concussion protocol in American football. Trust me. And so just just get it together. This is a basic safety concern that, in my opinion, the solution is super easy. So just get it done. And if anything, they should never have let him continue playing.
For me, it just starts with independent doctors, because you just can't trust team doctors at all to make these assessments, especially if you look at that Vertonghen case, which was just mind-boggling. Or, I mean, yes, a very special game, but the World Cup final was with Christoph Kramer, and he doesn't even remember playing. You know, people joke about it, and what I also didn't appreciate is just the I think it was the German Twitter account of Borussia Dortmund, who then basically said machine and then had the muscle emoji. That's just completely uncalled for. Anyway, let's move on a little bit, because the game changed then in the second half for Dortmund with the introduction of Mahmoud Dahoud, who obviously hadn't played since a friendly against, was it Preußen Münster? I think it was. And he didn't really cover himself in glory in that game. So, how did you see Mo Dahoud coming on after the break?
It's too bad Lars isn't here to answer that question. Just because I'm such a big Mo Dahoud fan. I'm honestly surprised he's still playing for Dortmund. Yeah, I mean, he's more creative than Delaney. He's a completely different type of player. Initially it was okay, but over to the long term of the match, the time that he played, he kind of reverted back to form of being a player that I think is a complete waste in a Dortmund squad. But he also regressed to the mean average of the team overall. So I can't say he was the worst player like he has been in the past. But he was just as bad as everybody else. He's not a difference maker. And there is a difference maker on that Dortmund bench right now who was in that match, who did not see the pitch. And I have no idea why he's not playing. I'll be perfectly honest, given how Mario Götze played last season. He was clearly the best player in the second half of the season for Dortmund. I don't know what's happened. This can't just be a contract thing. I don't think Favre really cares about that. So I'll be honest, I have literally no idea what the issue is.
Yeah, so I guess it's time to open that can of worms, which is the good old Trainer-Diskussion, because I am similarly baffled. I've said it before on the Gegenpressing podcast, which you can check out on the Football Grad Network. And I personally, and maybe this sounds a bit controversial, but for this game, I would have benched Marco Reus, because I don't think Marco Reus is the best and most effective against really these deep sitting teams. I think he has a habit of disappearing, or because he just needs a little bit more space, and these are often games where he just doesn't get it. Obviously, Marco Reus has the qualities to still make a difference in these games, but the chances for him to do that is just that much lower. And at the same time, I think Mario Götze can thrive, at least has the creative, the structural, whatever you want to call it, but he has the magic feet in the tighter spaces to make things happen that other players cannot. And he is just a very special player that Dortmund have and should use exactly for a game like this. So it's just very frustrating to see him on the bench for the full 90 minutes. And I thought, all right, after 75 minutes, when there was the water break and Dortmund had just conceded the third, I thought, all right, surely he will bring on Götze next. And nothing happened. And in the 86th minute, he brings on Brun Larsen. It's more and more difficult for me to have confidence in Lucien Favre, because last season we already, after a very good start, but then it deteriorated. His in-game coaching just sort of declined. And again, his decision-making just absolutely baffling. I mean, that's just a blatant error. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, Brun Larsen, I think, had 5 passes according to who scored, and all of them were backwards, and he had 0 impact on the game. Surprise, surprise. It was a team, the Dortmund side, that at the later stages of this game had completely lost its heads. It was a ferocious, spectacular atmosphere. Obviously, it's not easy to play in conditions like these, and Dortmund lost all of their structure and creativity, and then you need a player that provides exactly that, and you have Mario Götze on the freaking bench, so I don't know why you bring on Brun Larsen. I don't know why. I just don't know. Matthias, you have to explain to me what Favre's logic was behind that, because I completely failed to see it.
Well, obviously we're of the same mind there. And I agree with you. A 4-1-4-1 system probably would have been better. You pack more playmakers in there. I don't necessarily agree with not having Reus on there. I would have put Reus on the left wing, and then centrally you've got Brandt and Götze and Sancho on the right. And I think you can play to everybody's strength. And then you have an incredibly creative attacking team, because you don't really have to worry about too much at the back at that point, unless, you concede from 2 corners and 1 long throw. But with Favre, I kind of harken back. I was thinking about this morning when our discussion, when Favre was announced as the new head coach of Borussia Dortmund. Overall positive. I mean, he's obviously very intelligent, cerebral coach. Is, like you had mentioned previously, his overall idea makes perfect sense. However, we all were of the opinion that his overly patient, overly conservative nature can really be problematic at times. So It reminds me a lot of some of those incredibly boring Gladbach matches.
Yes, that's definitely true. And I mean, the problem with Favre right now is he has, I mean, this guy has not really managed to develop Dortmund in any sense, going forward the last 3 or 4 months. And the problems we are talking about today were the problems we were talking about in September. And it's just annoying. It really is, because there is not really a big development. Dortmund's set piece defending has been shit forever. And maybe fire Manfred Stefes, who's the guy in charge for that. Maybe Dortmund need to hire a special team coach. But it's also just the fact that Dortmund tried to move the ball around with their possession scheme and patience, but they just can't figure it out. And if there's not a, positive development, the tactical flexibility is not there to really make big adjustments that actually catches other coaches by surprise anymore. If all these things are missing, and you look at this team and it's the same errors again and again, then I just think you have to start wondering really if he is the right coach still. And we've seen this with Lucien Favre before, that his first season was great and maybe his second season too, but at some point there's a decline. And in my piece I've wondered about this, because Lucien Favre is a non-quitter, if you will, because he is just his nature is one of self-doubt, and some people are like that, and I think he's a very brilliant guy, don't get me wrong. But Dortmund is a big club, and as soon as that confidence drop by the fan base, if this is being echoed by the media or some other way into the club, which usually always happens, if people can feel the panic, then obviously Favre will sense that at some point too, and if he has this self-doubt, basically, what will happen then to him? You know what I mean? How will he deal with that situation? How will the whole club deal with that? I mean, I don't want to be too negative here, but I was really personally hoping that these errors and mistakes were a thing of the past with this summer, because I thought, okay, they would analyze all the mistakes, and obviously a couple of things you just can't, improve with the snap of a finger, but at least set piece defending, I think, is something you should be able to fix over a whole freaking summer break. And that's just extremely annoying. And so I don't know where to leave this, because you can't fire Lucien Favre. I don't think that would make any sense at all. Just for a lack of alternatives. I don't know if you want to have Mourinho or so, like Jesse Huber suggested, but I think Dortmund should maybe think about a new coach if there's not a turnaround sooner than later, because I personally have lost a lot of confidence in Favre. I mean, it was never at 100. To be fair, I'm more in Lars's camp there, but this game has to be seen in the context of last season, and that's just a horrible experience, which is why it, to me personally, was just a bit more painful to lose that way than, if it were another game or another loss, especially at the heel of the Cologne match, which was already going in a similar direction, and then Dortmund obviously turned it around, but, there were already the same symptoms, on display. So, quite annoying. I don't know how you see it, and if you want to talk about Favre and maybe Dortmund having to think about a different coach for the next season or so. But, it's match day 3. Maybe we're going a little bit too overboard with this. I don't know. But, I think it needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the quitting mentality was a big thing that I had an issue with Favre when he was first floated as manager. I made no bones about it.
I personally had a bigger problem with it after the Revier Derby, to be frank. That annoyed me, that he said, the championship is over now, when it was clearly not. So, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, and he's going to be an extremely short leash this season, given the high amount of investment that Dortmund made, the very not aggressive, but I'm not even going to say courageous, but them saying, hey, we want to win the title, as you should as Dortmund. You want to win the title. If you don't want to win the title, don't show up. Go away. That's your job. If you just want to seed the Bundesliga every season to Bayern or in future Leipzig, who I think will actually win it this year if Dortmund don't, then the Bundesliga is a pointless competition to watch anymore. So in my opinion, Favre, he needs to change completely in the next few weeks, which he won't, given his age. And unless there are some massive upticks over the course of the next 2 months, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a new manager in charge after the Winterpause.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know who Dortmund would get. Usually, if you lose on match day 3 after 4 wins in a row, you would be like, all right, okay, this is a slip up. This can happen. Let's move on. But in this case, I just see it a bit differently. And another thing that did Dortmund in, obviously, in this game is another individual mistake. There's not much you can do about that as a coach, I think. Manuel Akanji. And that's sort of vexing about the situation, because Union Berlin had a throw-in deep in their own half, and then, the throw-in was taken first time by, I don't even know who it was, but it was basically just a long punt down the field, which would have resulted in nothing had Akanji dealt with the ball normally, but it got away from him and straight in the feet of Marius Bülter, who then pinged it right forward to Sebastian Andersen, and then Akanji already he was still in better field position to defend that, but then was nutmegged, and then Roman Bürki with an amazing save. And here comes the next issue for Dortmund, is that just Julian Weigel's lack of pace in that instance is really horrible, because Bülter was still 5-6 meters behind Weigl when the whole play started, And he obviously was then the goal scorer who popped up in the background, and Weigl should have made that run up or whatever. But yeah, he just doesn't have the legs for that, and that's a critical issue as well. So yeah, just to name another thing that obviously needs to change, but I don't know how quickly it will change. I don't think Manuel Akanji is the worst footballer of all time, as some talk about it on Twitter, but at the same time, I can see that he is not fully, I don't know, I think his movement is just a bit more rigid than it was before. He had this hip injury, was apparently a bit complicated in January, and then should have had surgery and then didn't. So I just don't think he fully ever recovered from that, and I'm not entirely sure what the deal is with him, but he is not the same player that he was before his injury, and that is obviously concerning, because the next in line is Leonardo Balerdi, who comes with a lot of accolades but is yet to play Bundesliga football. So it's troublesome. But Matthias, maybe in general, how do you see that partnership of Hummels and Akanji?
Overall, very, very positive. I think Hummels is getting closer and closer to his pre-last season form, which obviously wasn't great. He's currently making Joachim Löw look kind of stupid, I'll be honest, because Germany are in dire need of a good central defender. And I'll be honest on the whole Akanji thing. That was his worst match as a Dortmund player, in my opinion. Yeah, he's lacking a little bit of the movement. I think it comes down to that injury. That'll be fine over time. In my opinion, he is one of the best central defenders in the Bundesliga. I can't name a ton of central defenders that are significantly better than him. He's only 24, which for maybe a winger is old, but for a central defender is still very, very young. And so being partnered up with Hummels, whereas last season it was like he was the key element. Now he can, not all the pressure is on him. I think he'll learn and he'll develop more and more, and he will be a dominant force. Do they make mistakes? Of course he makes mistakes. Every central defender makes mistakes. It's just becomes, again, it's goalkeepers and central defenders. If they make a mistake, it usually leads to a goal. If a striker makes a mistake or a winger makes a mistake, usually it doesn't lead to a goal unless you're Paco Alcácer defending corners in this match, because he made 2 mistakes that led to 2 goals. So overall, I think it's one of the best central defensive partnerships. We'll see where it goes the rest of the season. Hopefully they can remain fit. Obviously, Hummels doesn't have to worry about the international break as far as playing for Germany. Akanji will play, obviously, for Switzerland because he is their best defender. So no, I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic about the team. I think my slight pessimism does come back to Lucien Favre, who also, at the conclusion of the match against Union Berlin, and I know you shouldn't read too much into body language or expressions and faces and stuff, but I wasn't overly impressed by let's put it that way. I think a lot of the question marks are behind him versus the team. And again, Zorc and Watzke, Kehl, Sammer, the whole leadership council, so to speak, backed him by backing the team with more players, more money, moving out players he didn't need or want. And now it's put up or shut up time. Right now, it's not looking good for Favre. Again, it's only been 3 matches. We need to chill out. But
Leverkusen and Barca are next, so after that we can vent a little more if need be.
But I'll be honest, I think those 2 matches play into Dortmund's strengths rather than their weaknesses. I don't think those aren't the matches I'm worried about. I'm not even worried about Bayern. I'm not worried about those matches. I'm worried about Freiburg. I'm worried about Union Berlin. I'm worried about Schalke. Those are the matches I'm worried about, where you're playing against a clearly vastly inferior team. that knows the way to beat you is to basically play ugly football, because everyone's praising Union Berlin, and I think that has less to do with how Union Berlin played. It's not like this wasn't the second coming of Cruyff's Holland that was on the pitch. It was, they hardly had the ball. They hardly played a pass. They fouled the hell out of Dortmund. It is Darmstadt football in that sense. And more teams are going to play that style. And Darmstadt had success against Dortmund playing that style when Klopp was there. So that style of play, or was it under Tuchel? I can't remember. Either way,
I think it was under Tuchel.
Yeah, I try to erase Darmstadt from my memory because that was horrendous. But they're playing like that. Union Berlin played like that. They played a Burnley-style football. Köln tried to play that way. They just weren't as effective and efficient, and Dortmund didn't make as many mistakes. Dortmund made significantly more mistakes in this match. And the good adjustments that Favre did against Köln, because we can't forget that. He made the changes tactically and personnel-wise against Köln that completely flipped that game. In this game, he didn't. And they got punished for it.
Well,
and so
he made almost this, he made the same system change. He swapped to a 4-1-4-1 or 4-3-3 later on, but to no great effect. Also,
but the personnel wasn't there. The
Yeah.
personnel was wrong. The personnel package, he got it right. And sometimes they get it right, and sometimes they get it wrong. He got it gloriously right against Köln, gloriously wrong against Union Berlin. We'll see. We've got an international break. People will be fit again and coming back, hopefully. Nothing bad happens in the international break, but we also, it is an issue. It's an issue for a lot of teams that face teams that face opposition like that. There are a few teams, very few, that don't have an issue with that. Pep's Manchester City somehow find a way through there. Right now, Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool somehow find a way through there. Dortmund just aren't there. They're just not there because Favre is not as good of a coach as Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp. Shocker, I know. But
I know. Breaking news.
But he's not. And so the vast majority are not. And so you kind of have to go with those expectations. I think Dortmund are we are very spoiled. We had Jurgen Klopp and Thomas Tuchel, two very, very extremely high-performing, high-level coaches. And
even
then
they struggled at times in these games.
Of course they did, especially Tuchel in his second year. I mean, there were a lot of garbage games that Dortmund played where they played just like this against teams just like this. And this isn't the first time. And we think Union Berlin, Nuremberg last season played out the same way, except that Nuremberg didn't score because they didn't try. At least Berlin has tried to score, and they did. So again, I'm going to try to temper my negativity towards Lucien Favre by the fact that it is only the third match day. We have an international break where they can go back and analyze and go, what's right, what's wrong. It's easier, in my opinion, to correct those issues now, because we also can't forget there are a lot of new players, than when last season the problems started to happen for the last third of the season. Changing something then, especially given the high amount of injuries to the back line, et cetera, that you had, was very, very hard. If you're encountering those issues early in the season, you can then analyze and make the adjustments, also because you still have another transfer window coming up where you could maybe bring in a player or move out a player if need be. So I'm more optimistic about some of these issues coming to light now versus if they come to light in March. So, and there's still a lot of football left to play. Yes, I know Bayern won 6-1, but they will slip up. The one that I'm not worried, that I'm concerned about slipping up is Leipzig, because I'll be honest, they look like a well-oiled machine under Nagelsmann, and they're well ahead of where I thought they would be at this stage with him. And I will not be surprised if Leipzig win the Bundesliga this season.
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about Leipzig, it's just that they already had the best defense last season, and I don't know if Nagelsmann would ruin that so far. it prevents them from winning their crucial games. So far, it looks very good, but also Leipzig have only played 3 matches as well, so I want to be a bit more cautious there. But in general, I would agree with you. I think Leipzig look mighty strong. But if you want to win the Bundesliga, you don't want to win it just because everyone else really, really sucks. You want to win it because you're the best team in Germany. And this is what Dortmund need to do. They just need to play an amazingly stellar season. And that's what it's going to take. You can't have a mediocre season and try to win the Bundesliga. Maybe this works for Bayern in their own context and relativity, but it does not. But Matthias, you just mentioned the transfer window, building me a bit of a segue here, and because I wanted to assess the transfer window with you now that it closed shut on Monday at 6 p.m. local time in Germany. Marius Wolf has been loaned out to Hertha Berlin, and I've read that there is a buy option in that contract of 20 million. I'm not entirely sure if that's ever going to happen after Dortmund signed him for 5 million, but we will see. Nevertheless, overall, do you have a grade for this transfer window, and what did go well in your opinion, and what could have been done better?
I guess it depends on if we're what grading scale we're using.
If I were the ESPN editor, I would be like, and please keep it under 200 words. Thank you.
If are we using a German grading scale, American grading scale, Swiss grading scale? No, if we go 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, I would say Dortmund definitely had about an 8 to 9 transfer window. Strengthened the right areas, brought in a lot of very good players. 4 stellar signings. I still think Nico Schulz is a very good signing. I don't agree with Hakimi ahead of him in this match. Obviously Hummels, huge upgrade in defense. And then Azad and Brandt being really big upgrades. As far as the downsides for me, I would have personally hoped for initially I was like, well, maybe somebody more central midfield with more creativity, but really what you have there is that's where Brandt should play. That's where he shines. So I'm not overly concerned there. I don't know, like a real striker with Paco, would be nice. So, I'd love to know what happened with Isak, why that just didn't work out. It's a shame that a lot of players are loaned out again versus just flat out being sold. Andre Schüle, talk about the worst contract in Dortmund history. Ever. I mean, he's Dortmund's Gareth Bale in that sense, just in that sense. But the rest of it overall, I don't have any areas where I go, gosh, I wish they really would have added there or there or there or there. Probably an additional striker is the one area that I wish they would have added. Now that matches have been played, overall, I've been happy with it. I hope Brandt plays more, and I hope he plays more centrally. Whether we play a double pivot or a single pivot with a double 8 ahead of it, it remains to be seen if Favre is willing to change the system. But really, the only one where I'd say is just the lack of depth at striker does concern me a little bit. I know we have people that can play there like Götze and so on, but yeah, that's still an area where I kind of wish we'd have a quote-unquote real striker to work with Paco there.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think if I would get a rating, I would also be at 8 out of 10. Just because these 2 games perfectly illustrated why it can be very good for Dortmund to have a striker, because as I've described, opponents like to push their strikers forward and then defensive midfielders also to guard against Dortmund's defensive midfielders and stretch out the play. And if you then have a target man up front who can just lay it off for another player who can receive the ball with a back to his goal, then I don't think, with the amount of talent around whoever that striker would be, you don't even have to worry about that striker finishing or whatever, because you just would get the ball in the zones where you have players that are absolutely lethal there, be it Julian Brandt or Marco Reus or whatever, and Jadon Sancho. Obviously, Hazard, I think you can name there too, Guerrero. All these players can thrive in the half spaces when they receive a ball from a striker, and especially because it would utterly restrict opponents to play as courageously as they are doing right now against Dortmund, especially this kind of opponent. So the problem is getting a striker who can do that, but otherwise maybe doesn't get the most playing time, because Paco Alcácer in other games still would be my number one choice. But just to mix things up, like the Adrian Ramos type of player that, if nothing really works, that maybe after 50, 60 minutes, you bring on one tall striker and another creative player to play in exactly that zone. And then you have a whole new tactical scheme and option. But I don't think Lucien Favre wants that, because that sort of encourages players just to aimlessly cross the ball into the box. And this is obviously not what he wants to see. So that is number one. And I would have appreciated another defensive number 6 and it's obviously hard to get, but with a bit more agility and muscle. Maybe even a player like Renato Sanchez, I don't know, but I think Dortmund right now, if Axel Witsel isn't playing, or overall they lack a player that's is very fast. Julian Weigl obviously isn't that, and also can just muscle other players off the ball, but obviously has a bit more passing skills. So basically, I'm maybe looking at a Sebastian Rode with a bit more skill, but the problem is these players are extremely hard to get, and certainly not as a backup. So that's maybe something I would have liked instead of Dahoud, for example. Just to have this backup for Axel Witsel and the player type that he is, and just for a bit more defensive cover here and there and pressing resistance. But that is obviously a pipe dream of mine and is not going to happen. You can't really legit criticize Michael Zorc for not delivering a player like that, because they aren't there. And who knows, maybe we'll see more of Tobias Rasche, because I'm quite optimistic about him. He could be that sort of player, maybe further down the line or further down this season. Who knows? But yeah, I think that's just a player type that's missing. And against Union, I think we saw it quite clearly. The Delaney Weigl double pivot is just not my favorite thing, and I wish you could team up Weigl with a different player other than Delaney. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong there, but I think these are the two aspects where I would have said, all right, maybe that's okay. I think Dortmund took a bit of a gamble with the right back position, because Lukas Piszczek, his form might drop off. He did certainly not have a good game against Union Berlin, and Hakimi, I don't think is ready yet to permanently play as a fullback, just because his defensive soundness isn't just there yet. And but I'm excited about Matteo Morey, so I think that's overall fine from Dortmund. And of course, on the plus side, we've discussed it at length. Dortmund did just a spectacular job in getting Hazard and Brandt. That's just two amazing transfers, and if you combine that with the permanent signing of Paco Alcácer, who I think is an amazing striker, and Axel Witsel already in the last transfer season, I think the overall rebrand of Dortmund, or rebuild, or whatever you want to call it, has worked out amazingly. Sure, it would never be perfect, and there's always a transition in football. That's just how it is. But from the resources that Dortmund have, I think they did a mighty fine job. So I'm super pleased, and I think Dortmund have an amazing team, and there will be a lot of fun games going, forward against Union Berlin it certainly wasn't, but I think we also have to give credit to Union Berlin. That was their first Bundesliga win coming against Dortmund in that stadium with that atmosphere. It was an amazing and unforgettable night for all these fans. So, at least I'm happy for them that Dortmund lost to Union Berlin and not Paderborn or something. But, that might come later. Who knows?
Always the optimist.
Yeah.
Always the optimist.
I
mean, granted, we talk about good atmosphere and stuff like that. Obviously, there were some very ugly scenes as well.
Yes.
When it comes to support during that match, which I'm not overly surprised by, given some previous comments over the last few seasons between the supporters groups. So, it's an unfortunate sideshow that happened there. So hopefully at some point these types of fans will either just go away, which they won't, or their infantile behavior will just finally be eliminated from fan scene in general. But I am not optimistic about that.
No, me neither. And I think the police also overstepped, and there were multiple reports of people needing treatment after pepper spray was used in the block, which I don't think is ever a smart idea in the fan section, because there are just so many people there, and you will definitely hit people with that pepper spray that you do not want to hit. So but I think police tactics in football stadiums are never really perfect. So that's something that needs to be addressed. But who knows how this would have escalated. So it was probably good for the police to go in there, but the use of pepper spray was completely uncalled for, because it wasn't that chaotic at this point. I think mostly insults. So just a bit stupid, as per usual. But what you're gonna do? It's sadly the reality of fans going to the games, that they are being mistreated by the police. It happens in Germany, it happens in other countries. That's just how it is. And the good news is that there are a lot of outspoken fan groups and that lobby against that sort of police behavior. So at least something is being done about it, and people are not just, letting the police get away with it. So, yeah.
I would personally like to see fans start behaving properly.
Yes.
Because I think, in my opinion, the one begets the other. And knowing police officers that deal with crowd control situations, it's even harder in a stadium as small as Alte Försterei, simply because of the confines you're dealing with and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, a lack of training when it comes to that, which is completely shocking, in my opinion, that there's not more money invested in training police on how to deal with crowd control in a closed stadium. But at the same time, if you just quit acting like a dickhead, you're probably not going to get smacked in the face. So it would be nice if these fans at some point would also just police themselves to a higher degree and just eliminate those idiots. Just get rid of them. Just stop. And then these type of situations won't even come up. I personally always place more blame on the instigators of those types of situations, because in Germany we don't quite have the situation like you do in places like Italy or Turkey and stuff like that, where the police, to say go heavy-handed, is a bit of an understatement. And it's clear brutality, but it's also on both sides. Most German fans these days don't go armed into the stadium like you will have in Italy, for instance, or in Russia and places like that I've noticed and that I've read. But it's a shame that some idiot fans decided to act like idiots again, and hopefully one day they'll grow up, and not do that. But then the next group of idiots will be right there to pick up the mantle.
Generation of knuckleheads.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, in the 80s and 90s, you had hooligans. You don't have hooligans anymore, and now you have ultras. Ultras and hooligans aren't the same thing. But there are clear segments within the ultra scene that are basically hooligans. Maybe a little more creative, but behavior is basically the same thing. And having stood in stadiums both now and in the 90s, there's not a huge difference when it comes to the idiots in the crowd. They always tend to be the same group of people.
Yeah, I'm more concerned really with the bystanders who didn't really do nothing than get pepper sprayed. That's just you just want to have a great day of football and not deal with that because of the idiots to your right or left or wherever you stand. So that's just quite annoying. But I think there will be further comments and statements and reports on that incident. So we'll keep you posted on the Yellowwall.net. Anyway, Matthias, is there anything else you want to say on this game, or do you think we've talked it out?
I just as soon move on and forget it ever happened, because I'm pretty sure Lucien Favre will forget it had ever happened, and it'll happen again. So, wow, this went dark so fast.
I know. I thought we nearly talked it through and got it out of our systems, but you pulled us up all back.
No, I honestly, I always try to look at the bright side. It's still early. I have hope it'll change. And if he doesn't change, he will get changed. I have absolute faith in that. After these investments, I don't think Watzke and Zorc will hesitate to replace Lucien Favre if a proper candidate, not named Hitlerstuga, is available.
Well, if we do want to look at the bright side, we must say that Dortmund did not completely fall asleep from the get-go. That was a much better start than they displayed against Cologne, where they were just atrocious in the first half hour. And there were some good instances of football. So yeah, a couple of moments were unlucky, especially Julian Brandt with the 2 moments where he could have easily played a very nice assist, but overcooked the ball. These things happen, and that's unlucky, but obviously, there was also a lot of shit that's just completely unacceptable from a footballing standpoint in this game, especially in the last half hour where Dortmund practically produced nothing and overall just had 2 shots on target. I think stats wise, a couple of expected goal models also had Union Berlin win that matchup, so that does not bode well. So yes, there's more work to do, and I really hope they figure it out, but I'm a bit in a similar camp with you. I don't think it's going to change from one week to the next. I think we will see this sort of game again at some point this season. So it's just annoying to lose the lead in the table like that. And Leverkusen next will not be any easier, but we'll preview this game next week. So that's all I have to say, Matthias. So if there are any, there's this one subject I wanted to ask you real quick about Marco Reus. I don't know if you said it in jest or was super serious, but he said that he'll do anything to recruit Kai Havertz from Leverkusen, and said that he will rely also on the help of Julian Brandt. What do you make of that?
Well, Michael Zorc immediately told him to shush, basically. It's great. Obviously, who wouldn't want Kai Havertz on their side? Everyone is linking him to Bayern simply because of the money that Bayern would pay to have him. I think they'll outbid Dortmund because they just have more money than Dortmund.
Oh, please. Dortmund going to come around with that Sancho money.
That's true. Sancho gets sold to some team in the Premier League for 100 and gazillion million. Then you've got the Kai Havertz money. And in that instance, then I would absolutely go after him full tilt. Buy him. Pay him max salary that you have in your team, and he'll be happy, especially if he'll link up with Julian Brandt again, and obviously has a relationship with Marco Reus, and especially if at that time, for some reason, Götze wouldn't be there. I mean, Kai Havertz at this point, there aren't many that I would go, oh, that's a big upgrade over Götze, but Kai Havertz right now versus Mario Götze right now, I would see as an upgrade, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah, maybe on that note, if Dortmund ever find a new coach, I really would hope it would be someone that finds a way to reintegrate Mario Götze again, because I'm a big fan of his, and would just hope to see him perform again as he did last season, because that was quite spectacular at times. And his talent right now seems a bit wasted. Also, we did not entirely discuss the transfer or the loan rather of Marius Wolf. I personally think that this basically means the end of his Dortmund spell. I don't think he will come back and then play again for Dortmund. What do you think? A right decision from Dortmund to let him go now? Do you think they need his depth or whatever he offers the team, or do you think this was fine?
I'm fine with it. I think Marius Wolf is a decent player for a team that's not called Borussia Dortmund. I mean, maybe the next tier below that. He shined. He had a very good time under Kovac at Frankfurt, and I think that's his type of system. Definitely not the Lucien Favre system, or that type of system that I think Dortmund want to have, that more possession-oriented football. So he's definitely in a better position where he goes somewhere where he's going to have space to run into and utilize his greatest asset, which is his speed and physical presence. So I wish him all the best at Hertha. If he has a good season there, I wouldn't be surprised if they make that loan deal permanent.
Yeah, I would also not be shocked, because Hertha is exactly the kind of team that plays the way that might favor his style of play. I would not be shocked to see it come to the best fruition against Dortmund on, I think he even said it himself, match day 13. Marius Wolf, obviously, a fighter, and I don't think Dortmund have enough of these characters in their teams, even still. So that's obviously a loss, but considering the amount of playing time that he would get and the amount of games where he would actually be effective, it's just too rare. So I think in the end it makes sense. I had the Paulo on our Twitter account, and I think the split was really down the middle, 50-50, of people who thought it was a good idea and people who thought Dortmund should have kept him. I'm okay with it. So we'll see. Maybe in 2 episodes I'll be, oh god, how could they do this? Now everyone's injured, no one's left. But then we can maybe see more of Gio Reyna, so I wouldn't be too sad about that either. Anyway, Matthias, I think that's a good moment to knock it on the head and say our goodbyes. Matthias, how can people get in touch with you?
You can find me on Twitter at Matthias Hug.
Very well. You can find me at Stefan Butzko on Twitter. If you want to get in touch with all of us, please do that on Twitter as well. At Yellowwallpod is our Twitter and Facebook handle. And if you want to subscribe to the written content, like the article that I just published, then go to theyellowwall.net and become a Patreon subscriber for $1 a month, which is, I hope, very affordable for you all, and would make me certainly more happy in life and overall. So please do that and support us. And if you don't want to contribute financially, you can still share our podcast and tell fellow Dortmund fans. That would be great. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, now also on Google Music, and you can also find our YouTube channel on our webpage. So it's all there. Again, if you also want to sponsor an episode, go on patreon.com/theyellowwall and find more information there. We will be back next week for the Leverkusen preview, and maybe also, I think the Barcelona game is on a Tuesday, so I think we'll talk about these 2 very exciting games. Jesus Christ, man. I can't wait. So until next week again, especially this week, everyone out there, thank you for listening. Goodbye.